Either these guys are family, or they're fighting over their version of toilet paper. As fun as the hummingbirds are to watch, I wish I could let them know that there's more than enough for everybody. The Shop Foundation. It's been a few years since I first poured the Shop Foundation. Above and beyond clearing the land, it was one of the very first projects I took on. This foundation was originally going to be our house. The dimensions on the foundation are about 40 feet by 40 feet. The plan was to build almost the same style of home that we now live in on this foundation. Pouring this foundation is still to this day one of the single hardest things I've ever done in my life. It was late fall and I was trying to get the concrete foundation finished before snow flew. The thought that I had at that time was that I could work through winter framing the house. The fall weather was unforgivable, as usual, but I was not prepared for this at that time. We were under some external pressure to continue building the house, and I did everything I possibly could to get the foundation finished, the plumbing then roughed in, the slab poured, and again to hopefully be able to frame all the way through winter.
Wait, does this thing control that?
Uh-huh. There were a number of little things that have happened over the last few years to change this from the original house foundation to the shop foundation. Part of this was cost, part of it was timing, part of this was sewer, water, and the simple fact that I didn't realize how hard it was going to be to build a house up here at that time. Fast forward 3 years, a very similar house to what we originally wanted to build is now nearly finished. But in the meantime, the concrete foundation has reminded me not only how hard things can be up here, but has also been a vivid memory of an unfinished job.
You need to go down. About one more scoop down.
In some ways, I feel this concrete foundation mocks me and my original plans.
He's moving.
That building our home and building our homestead and building this shop was collectively going to be the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. The shop foundation has become a catch-all for everything from insulation to barnwood to ABS and PVC pipe to you name it. I'm tired of looking at the mess that it's become, and I'm tired of the haunting memory that it represents. Frankly, it represents a bit of a negative experience in our life, and I'm ready to turn it into a positive.
Break off where we wanted it to break off. Sure did. Like that.
So, was it being held on by rebar or not? I don't see any rebar.
Rebar there, rebar there.
Now that we have decided for certainty that this will be my shop,
It's going.
I first need to cut in the garage door opening. The garage door opening will measure 12 feet and 3 inches. By the way, in the middle of this, we have company in town for Cheyenne's graduation.
Is this on the right side? Yes.
Who cares?
I was up there and I was like, it's on the right side, right? And he was like, I had it on this side.
Now it's gone. Oh.
This is how our little small town has decided to celebrate those that have graduated this year.
May God bless you in your union and in the joy of your posterity, that you may have a long and happy life, and that He will also bless you to remember to keep the sacred vows you have made this day. Amen. And now kiss your brother.
This week, we were also blessed with the opportunity to attend a very special wedding and spend some much-needed time with family. It just so happens that right before I'm about to dive heavily into the construction of what will hopefully be my very last shop, I attend a wedding that was held in a very old barn that was built in what is called the Gothic arch style. While I sat and enjoyed the wedding, my brain ran amok. I looked that barn over from the inside out and quickly realized I would love to have this barn sitting right next to my house. Is it possible that I can build this barn to modern day standards? Is it possible that this barn will handle the snow load of what we have up at the ranch? Will this barn sit on my existing foundation? Could I add a second story to this barn for family gatherings, just like the one we're having here and now? My brain has not stopped thinking about how I can make this work since I first became familiar with this Gothic arch barn. But before I can dive into framing, I've got to get the foundation level. I've got to get the dirt work level, get the plumbing roughed in, get the sewer and water line roughed in, tie off some rebar, and get ready to pour some concrete. I rented a skid steer from the local hardware store, and I paid for a week, thinking that not only will I be able to get the pad leveled, but the driveway out in front of the barn leveled as well, and maybe even have some extra time on my hands at the end of the week to do some other things with the skid steer. I spent the first 2.5 days going over and over and over the dirt work, using my laser level with the intent of getting it precision flat. The plan is to not only pour the slab within the foundation, but pour about an 18 by 40 slab outside of the foundation and build some sort of a covered structure there for the firewood, maybe for the four-wheelers, lawnmower, and maybe we can even squeeze Cedar's car in there somewhere. So technically I've got about 30 yards of concrete that need to be poured as soon as I can get them poured. Little did I know that about 2.5 days into my week-long skid steer rental, Mother Nature was going to remind me again who was in control. Now, when I poured this foundation some 3 years ago, I hadn't come to grips with just how the weather works in southeastern Idaho. And the truth is, the weather does whatever it wants to do, whatever time of year it happens to be. But we had only been living in southeastern Idaho about a year and a half at that time. I'm not kidding when I tell you that this foundation mocks me every time I walk by it. The Simmons wall panels that I used, I rented for about 10 days. It cost me somewhere around $1,500 to rent these forms. In the middle of setting the panels, it rained over and over and over again. I ended up having the panels for 2 weeks longer than I was supposed to have them. Thank goodness the rental company let me slide on those extra 2 weeks. The Simmons panels that I used for the most part were 2-foot by 8-foot panels. Each one of those panels has to weigh somewhere around 100 pounds. We moved a couple hundred of those panels. In the middle of setting those panels, the weather constantly reminded me who in fact was in charge. Now, over the last 4 years that we've been working on our home and our homestead, we have learned to expect the unexpected. So much so that we don't get surprised anymore by these unforeseen challenges. And maybe building a shop that is a Gothic arch-inspired barn that might be similar to some of the last of the few barns that are left in our little community that were built easily over 100 years ago would cause me to have a joy in my heart instead of the regret that this foundation has represented for so long. And like I said, just when I thought things were moving in our favor, Mother Nature again reminded us who was in control. Next week, we will get the plumbing roughed in. We will get the rebar tied. And maybe, we will get some concrete poured.